They never saw the end coming. Not when the first emergency broadcasts hit the screens. Not when the news anchors went silent mid-sentence. And not even when the skies above the city glowed red as entire sectors burned. It all happened faster than anyone imagined. Within 72 hours, civilization collapsed. Governments vanished. Borders ceased to matter. The infected swarmed through towns and cities like a flood without mercy. Entire armies fell under the weight of the undead tide. But not everyone was lost. In the chaos, as towers crumbled and streets turned into hunting grounds, a group of survivors, 100 strong, banded together. They weren't soldiers. They weren't trained heroes. They were teachers, mechanics, students, refugees, former law enforcement, even ex-convicts. What bound them wasn't trust. It was desperation. And inside that desperation, resistance was born. Their stronghold wasn't a fortress. It was a neglected hydroelectric dam, 20 miles outside the city. It was old, rusted, forgotten by most. But it had high ground, reinforced steel gates, and most importantly, power. They called it Station Echo. It was never meant to last. But it became their lifeline. Every room was repurposed. The turbine control center became their command post. The empty service tunnels below transformed into sleeping quarters. The loading dock became a makeshift garage for scavenged vehicles. And the spillway? That became their wall of fire, lined with gasoline and crude traps, just in case the dead ever made it that far. They had food for a month. Water indefinitely. And a reason to fight. That was day zero. Lena Voss, a former disaster response coordinator, emerged as their leader. She was sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, and had buried her entire family in the first wave. She didn't talk much about the past, but when she did, people listened. Beside her was Malik, once a power grid engineer, now in charge of keeping the dam's turbines running and the perimeter sensors alive. There was also Cass, a 20-year-old medic who had never treated a gunshot wound before the fall, but now ran the triage unit with steady hands and no sleep. And Roman, a quiet man with a dark past, who knew how to move through ruined streets like a ghost and return with food, ammo, or whatever they needed to stay alive. Together, they kept the 100 breathing. But on the sixth night, the screaming began. The sound came from beyond the trees, long, drawn-out cries for help. A woman. Maybe two. They echoed over the treetops and down the canyon toward Station Echo. New recruits panicked. They rushed for the gate, screaming that they had to save whoever was out there. Lena stopped them. It's a trap. Roman backed her up. The dead are learning. They've been mimicking sounds. Cass whispered, they're baiting us. The cries continued. Louder. Closer. And then came the shuffle, hundreds of feet dragging through the underbrush. Cracking branches. The smell. The horde had found them. There wasn't time to panic. Malik triggered the outer defenses, sheets of fire rose from the spillway. Arrows laced with pitch lit the trees. Barricades collapsed in controlled slides to funnel the dead into kill zones. They fought like hell. From the dam's top levels, survivors fired everything they had, bolt-action rifles, flare guns, even sharpened rebar. Lena barked orders. Roman moved through shadows, cutting down stragglers. Cass dragged the wounded back, one arm smeared with blood. By dawn, the forest below Station Echo was a graveyard of scorched corpses. But the message was clear. They weren't hidden anymore. Later that day, Lena stood before the group, her voice low but steady. They're not like before. They're adapting. Testing us. Watching. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But they don't know one thing, she continued. They don't know what we've been building here. What we're planning. What we're willing to do to survive. A pause. Then she said it, the word no one dared before. Resistance. Roman nodded. They think we're prey. Let's remind them who we were. Malik added, this dam isn't our cage. It's our weapon. Cheers broke out. Even the most terrified among them stood straighter. For the first time, the survivors weren't just trying to survive. They were preparing to fight back. Far out in the woods, miles from the dam, a lone zombie moved among the dead. Its eyes didn't glaze like the others. It didn't shuffle. It stood still, unnaturally so. Watching. Listening. It turned its head toward the rising smoke. And then it walked, slow, deliberate, back into the trees. Whatever the humans were planning. The horde had noticed. Rain battered the dam roof as Malik fine-tuned the radio tower, hands numb from cold. Each drop sounded like a warning, sharp, loud, and relentless. The storm had rolled in quickly, as if the sky itself wanted to smother what little hope the survivors still carried. Inside the command center, Lena stood hunched over a map marked with red lines and black crosses. The latest attack had come from the northeast, organized, targeted. It wasn't random anymore. These aren't just infected, she said. Someone, or something, is leading them. Cass sat nearby, patching up a young woman with a nasty arm bite. It was shallow, non-infected, but the girl still shook like she'd seen a ghost. I think they're watching us, she whispered. I saw eyes in the trees, before they came. Roman leaned against the wall, arms crossed. She's not wrong. I felt it too. Whatever's guiding the dead, it's smart. Suddenly, Malik's voice crackled through the comms. Lena. You better get up here. She sprinted to the roof. There, through the static-laced radio speaker, a voice echoed. Faint. Broken. But real. Survivors, echo, response, repeat, survivors, in, south. Lena froze. That voice wasn't one of theirs. They played the message over and over. The signal was weak, bouncing off the mountains, but one word cut through every time, south. It was a long shot, but the team knew what it meant. There were others. Still alive. Roman was the first to speak. Could be a trap. Could be hope, Cass replied. Lena made the decision. We send a scout team. Small. Fast. Quiet. We don't risk all 100, but we don't ignore this either. Roman nodded slowly. Then I'll lead them. By the next morning, the scout team was ready, Roman, Cass, a tracker named Finch, and Elias, a wiry ex-mechanic turned sharpshooter. They packed light and quiet. 1 rifle each. 1 pistol. Medical supplies. No radios, only flares for emergency signaling. The other survivors gathered at the gate. No one cheered. No one cried. They just watched as 4 of their own vanished into the mist-choked trees, chasing a voice in the static. The road south was a broken trail of bones and rust. Abandoned cars littered the highway, their windows smeared with dried blood. Burned homes whispered of families who had once believed the worst was over. They reached an old bridge by sunset. The river below had turned black with ash. Just before they crossed, Finch raised a hand. Movement. Across the bridge, something crawled. Not shuffling like a zombie. Not sprinting like a raider. This one was crawling, deliberately. Its eyes were intact, blue, human. But its jaw was torn away, and its fingers twitched as if remembering how to hold a weapon. Cass gasped. What is that? Roman didn't answer. He stepped forward and put a bullet through the thing's skull. Elias muttered, that wasn't normal. Roman crouched beside the body. Underneath the tattered rags, he found a crude device embedded in its spine, some kind of implant, melted into bone. "Someone's experimenting on them," he said coldly. "And controlling them," Finch added. Cass stared out at the horizon. "Who the hell are we up against?" Back at Station Echo, Lena studied the scout team's last known coordinates. Her finger traced the route south, then paused on a town circled long ago, Warren's Field. It had once been a military checkpoint. If the signal came from there, then someone with knowledge, maybe even equipment, was trying to reach out. Malik approached, a grim look on his face. "We've had another breach." Lena's heart sank. "How close?" "Too close. West perimeter." 3 guards didn't report back. Lena grabbed her rifle. "Let's go." They reached the west watchtower under fading light. The gate was intact. No signs of break-in. But inside the tower, what they found chilled them to the bone. The guards were still there, dead, but untouched by the infected. Each one had a bullet in the head. Executed. No signs of struggle. No bite marks. Just a clean, methodical kill. One of them, a teenager named Harper, still clutched a flashlight. Malik shook his head. This wasn't the infected. Lena said what they both feared. It was someone testing our response time. That night, the survivors didn't sleep. Station Echo went dark. No lights. No sound. No fire. Whatever was out there had reached them. Not just the infected. But something worse. Something human. And as the first flare lit the southern sky, signaling the scout team had reached something, Lena knew the resistance wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about finding the enemy hiding in the chaos. And ending them. The flare bloomed red against the dark sky like a bleeding wound. Lena saw it from the watchtower, distant, far south, a single burst of hope that told her Roman's team had reached something. But whether it was salvation or slaughter, no one knew yet. She turned to Malik. "Get the gates reinforced. Double guards on every sector. We hold until they send another signal." He nodded, but the tension between them was clear. If the infected were evolving, and someone was behind it, then the threat wasn't just outside the walls anymore. It could be inside. Meanwhile, miles away, Roman and his team approached the edge of Warren's Field. What had once been a bustling military town was now a maze of half-collapsed buildings and ash-filled streets. The silence was heavier than the fog. No birds. No wind. Not even the groans of the undead. Cass whispered, "This place feels wrong." Elias checked the rooftops. Too quiet. Roman raised his hand. "Stay sharp." They moved in pairs, weapons drawn, nerves tight. The streets were eerily clean, no bodies, no blood, no typical signs of a zombie surge. But there were signs of control. Each building they passed had marks on the doors. White paint. Symbols. Arrows. Circles. Numbers. Like someone had catalogued the entire town. Cass brushed dust off a sign near a church entrance. Quarantine Zone Delta, 12. Evac status, terminated. That was the first time any of them felt truly cold. In the town square, they found the source of the signal. A solar-powered relay antenna, hooked into an old military vehicle, still humming faintly. Finch checked it. "This thing's broadcasting on a loop. Same message, over and over." Roman frowned. But who started it? Then they heard it, scratching. From inside the nearby chapel. Roman gave a signal. They entered carefully, weapons raised. What they found was not what they expected. A woman, alone, tied to a chair. Pale. Eyes bloodshot. Lips cracked. She wasn't a zombie. She was human. Barely. Cass rushed forward. She's alive. Finch cut the ropes while Roman checked the corners. The woman trembled as she spoke. They left me here, to see if you'd come. Cass blinked. What? They needed to know, if others were still out there. If the resistance was real. Roman crouched beside her. Who's they? The woman looked him in the eye. They control the infected. They study them. Test them. Some of them used to be human too. But not anymore. She coughed violently. Blood on her sleeve. They call themselves the Harbingers. At Station Echo, Lena stood before the Council of Survivors. She laid it out plainly. We've confirmed something is guiding the infected. Killing our guards. Manipulating our defenses. Whispers spread like wildfire. They have a name now, she continued. Harbingers. People asked the same question, are they human? Lena's response was firm. Maybe they were. Not anymore. They're building something with the infected. A network. A hive. One of the engineers asked, why? What's the goal? Lena didn't blink. To finish what the virus started, and wipe us out completely. Back in Warren's field, the woman they rescued, her name was Iris, lay under a thermal blanket. Cass did her best to stabilize her, but Iris's condition was deteriorating fast. She clutched Roman's hand. There's a lab, she whispered. Underground. Behind the library. That's where they're making them, the ones who think. Roman's eyes narrowed. Making what? Commanders. Leaders of the dead. Like generals. Finch whispered, then we burn it down. But Iris shook her head. They're not there now. They moved east. Toward your dam. The realization hit them all at once. The Harbingers weren't finished probing Echo. They were preparing to attack it. That night, Roman and his team explored the underground chamber beneath the library. It was worse than they imagined. Tanks filled with dark fluid. Limbless corpses floating inside, twitching. Notes in broken English and strange symbols describing neural dominance, infected retention, and increased control radius. They were trying to evolve the undead. Not just into killers. But into soldiers. Cass whispered, this is war. Roman lit the charges. As the lab exploded behind them, Iris died quietly in her sleep, freed from the horrors she had witnessed. But now the team carried something far more dangerous than guilt. They carried proof. And the Harbingers would come for it. The explosion in Warren's field sent a column of smoke spiraling into the sky, visible even from the outer ridges of Station Echo. Lena watched through binoculars from the North Tower, her jaw tightening. They found something, she said. Beside her, Malik nodded grimly. Let's hope it was worth it. That night, the forest around Echo stayed silent, but it wasn't peace they felt. It was waiting. Roman's team returned at dawn, bruised, burned, and bloodied. They brought no survivors, but what they carried instead was worse, a journal, half-burnt, recovered from the Harbinger's lab. Lena scanned the pages quickly. Diagrams of infected anatomy, sketches of grotesque implants, notes on behavioral modifications. This isn't infection anymore, she whispered. This is engineering. Roman leaned against the table, weary. They're building leaders for the undead. Commanders. Finch added, and they're heading here. The survivors inside Echo looked around, suddenly aware of the thinness of their walls. Preparations began immediately. Barricades were reinforced with steel. Spotlights repositioned. Food supplies redistributed in case of a long siege. Lena called an emergency assembly in the old dam hall. We don't know how many are coming, she said. But we do know they're organized. That means we treat this like a war. Not a survival run. One older man, a former police officer named Yora, raised his hand. How do we know we can win? Lena didn't flinch. We don't. But I'd rather die fighting for this place than crawling in the dirt like a coward. The hall echoed with silence, then nods. That was all she needed. As night fell, shadows moved beyond the trees. A soft whistle. Then another. Malik stiffened on the south wall. They're here. He peered through the scope of his rifle and saw them, barely visible in the fog. Dozens of infected standing still. Just standing, like statues. Lena joined him. Why aren't they charging? And then, as if summoned by her question, a tall figure stepped from the mist. Clothed in tattered military gear. Metal spikes protruding from its spine. Its skin was gray, veined with black rot, but its eyes were calculating. It raised its hand. And the infected moved forward in unison. Hold! Lena yelled. Wait for my signal. The undead approached, not in chaos, but in formation. Roman, stationed on the upper wall, aimed for the tall one. That's the leader. He fired. The shot slammed into the figure's shoulder, yet it didn't fall. It twisted unnaturally, absorbed the impact, and kept walking. Fire! Lena shouted. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the horde. Some fell. Most didn't. The infected began climbing the outer barricades with unnatural speed and coordination. Like soldiers scaling a fortress. Cass manned the flamethrower near the west gate. Incoming. She pulled the trigger, unleashing a wall of fire. Screams filled the air, not just zombie growls, but human voices. Roman shouted, "They've got harbingers mixed in." It was a coordinated assault. The infected acted as a shield, while the harbingers picked off sentries from the trees. Inside the main compound, young survivors loaded ammunition and carried supplies to the front lines. One of them, 12-year-old Myra, tripped and spilled a crate of bullets. A hand reached out to help her, an old woman named Maris, once a teacher, now a resistance cook. "You carry bullets now," she said softly. "One day, you'll carry this whole place." Myra nodded, wiping tears away. The spirit of Echo wasn't just in its guns. It was in its people. On the front wall, Roman took a deep breath. "We need to take down that commander." Finch replied, "Easier said than done." Lena appeared, handing Roman a long-range bolt launcher, one of their last scavenged weapons from a military outpost. "Don't miss," she said. Roman took aim. The commander was close now, just 30 meters away, directing the infected with gestures, like a conductor leading an orchestra of death. Roman's finger tightened on the trigger. He fired. The bolt ripped through the commander's eye. It fell, twitching violently, then went still. Instantly, the infected froze. Some collapsed. Others wandered aimlessly. The formation broke. Lena whispered, it was controlling them. But the damage was done. Echo had taken losses. Fires burned. Bodies lay still. And though the horde had scattered, one message was clear. This was only the beginning. Later that night, Lena stood over the corpse of the commander. Up close, it looked almost human, until she saw the stitches along its neck, the metallic implant embedded in the skull, and the number tattooed on its wrist, number 07. "There are more," she murmured. Roman stepped beside her. "How many?" She didn't answer. But deep down, she feared the truth. The harbingers weren't sending their full force. This was a test. And Echo had barely survived it. The smoke still hung over Station Echo by morning. Fires had been controlled, the dead, both human and infected, were burned in silence, and the wounded lined the infirmary, wrapped in makeshift bandages, their eyes hollow. They had survived the first wave. Barely. Roman stood over the wall with a scoped rifle slung across his chest. He hadn't slept. His gaze never left the forest. The body of the infected commander had been burned with caution, its metallic implant salvaged. Now it sat on the war table like a relic of some cursed god. Lena entered the hall with a map under her arm. It's time we stop reacting and start striking. Around her, the surviving leaders gathered: Malik, Cass, Finch, a few former soldiers, farmers, and mechanics who had become defenders. She unrolled the map and pointed to a location marked in red. This was mentioned in the journal Roman recovered. A Harbinger base, here, in the canyon ruins east of Ridgepoint. Cass frowned. Is it active? Highly. Iris said they relocated there after abandoning the Warrens field lab. If we're going to stop their next move, it starts here. Roman leaned forward. Then we go in fast. Strike hard, cripple their chain of command before they send another one of those commanders. Malik added, and if it's a trap? Lena's voice was cold. Then we spring it with a vengeance. The plan came together over the next 24 hours. 20 fighters volunteered. Only the best. Roman, Cass, Malik, and Finch would lead the infiltration team. A second group would stay behind to defend Echo, led by Lena. If this failed, at least Echo would still have a spine to regroup around. Supplies were rationed. Drones were prepped. The implant retrieved from the fallen commander was wired into a hacked interface. The hope was to use it to jam enemy signals for a short time during the strike. Finch called it the Blackout Gambit. There were no guarantees. But there never had been. The next evening, the strike team left under cloud cover, traveling through burned-out highways and hollow towns. The land was no longer dead, it listened. Roman noticed it. The wind moved strangely. Animals didn't return. Even the infected no longer roamed without purpose. Something had changed in the air. Cass said it aloud, it's like they've gone underground. Malik whispered back, or they're waiting. By the second night, they reached the canyon. The Harbinger facility was built into the rock, half bunker, half laboratory, protected by thick metal walls and guarded not by zombies, but by something worse. Sentinels. Once human. Now armored. Programmed. Silent. Moving like machines. Through binoculars, Finch observed them. We go in loud, we die in 10 seconds. Roman studied the terrain. There was a drainage tunnel carved into the cliffside, a maintenance path once used before the world fell. Cass, you and I will take the tunnel. Malik and Finch, 'cause a distraction with the drone flare. We get in, plant explosives, destroy whatever they're building. Cass nodded. And if we can't get out? Roman checked the detonator. Then we make sure none of them do either. As the flare soared over the canyon, the sentinels turned in unison. Malik fired from cover. The defenders returned fire, but it was chaotic, exactly what they needed. Inside the tunnel, Roman and Cass crawled through damp, rusted metal, emerging into a chamber lit by flickering blue lights. It wasn't a base. It was a breeding lab. Dozens of tanks. Bodies inside. Some still twitching. Others fully grown, with implants gleaming and veins pulsing black. Cass stepped back. They're making armies. Thousands of them. Roman placed the explosives on the main power conduits. Then we stop it now. But just as they finished arming the charges, the door slammed shut. A voice echoed from the loudspeakers. You resist. That is admirable. Roman raised his weapon. Who the hell are you? The voice replied, calm and cold. We are the future of this world. Flesh perfected through control. We are what you refuse to become. Cass spat on the floor. You're monsters. We are evolution. Outside, Malik and Finch were pinned down. The sentinels moved with terrifying efficiency, no fear, no fatigue. Malik was hit in the shoulder. Finch dragged him behind a wrecked rover. Roman, Cass, whatever you're doing, do it now. Inside the lab, Roman found a weak point in the ceiling grate. He climbed up, pulled Cass through with him, and triggered the explosives from above. The entire chamber shook. Fire roared. The tanks ruptured. Howls filled the air, both human and inhuman. They ran. The tunnel behind them collapsed, but they dove into the canyon river, letting the current pull them far from the burning lab. Hours later, soaked and limping, Roman and Cass returned to the rendezvous point. Finch had patched up Malik. One of the sentinels' arms now lay severed beside them, a brutal trophy. Roman looked back toward the smoke rising over the canyon. It's not over. Cass replied, but we just made them bleed. The black smoke rising from the canyon burned for 3 days straight. The lab was gone. So were the clones inside. But the resistance fighters who returned to Station Echo brought more than just injuries and ashes. They brought questions. Doubt. And fear. They were building an army, Roman told Lena. And not just mindless corpses, soldiers. Ones who can think. Lead. Obey. Lena studied the charred metal implant Roman dropped on the table. It looked almost identical to the one recovered from the canyon, except this one was new. Untouched by flame. Then this war, she whispered, is no longer between us and the undead. It's between us, and whatever's controlling them. The next 2 days at Echo were quiet. Too quiet. Patrols found no infected nearby. No movement in the forest. Even the crows that usually circled the walls had vanished. Malik, arms still in a sling, said what everyone else was thinking. They're regrouping. Finch disagreed. They're studying us. After what we did at the canyon, they want to know who hurt them, and how to stop us next. Cass was on edge. She'd barely spoken since the mission. Only trained. Patrolled. Watched. Then, on the 3rd night, the alarms went off. Gunfire rattled the south wall. By the time Lena reached the gate, 3 guards were dead, and 1 survivor, a boy named Eli, was missing. Roman inspected the bodies. Not zombies. These were knife wounds. Human. Lena's blood ran cold. How did someone get inside? Cass pointed to a torn section of the outer fencing, covered hastily with brush and leaves. A breach, she said. From the outside. But what scared them more was what they found by the fence. A tag. Metal. Stamped. Harbinger Operative, Unit Number 12. They gathered every member of Echo in the main square. All 94 remaining souls. Lena's voice was firm. We believe someone, or something, is already inside. One of the Harbingers may have infiltrated this place. That's why the infected are holding back. Cass added, they're waiting for our walls to fall from the inside. Murmurs erupted. Panic. Yora, the former cop, raised his hand. So what, now we turn on each other? No, Lena said. We stay vigilant. We rotate patrols. We test for inconsistencies. If someone is a threat, we'll find out. But the doubt had already taken root. That night, Finch rigged a biometric scanner using parts from the old drone system. It couldn't detect clones, but it could scan for implants. Every resident was checked. Everyone was clean. Except one. A girl named Kyra. 16. Quiet. Kept mostly to herself. Her scan lit up, twice. One in her wrist. Another in the base of her neck. When confronted, she didn't run. She smiled. Cass tackled her before she could speak again. But the smile didn't fade. You think this war is still about flesh and bullets, Kyra said calmly. But we've already won. You're just catching up. Malik tied her down in the interrogation tent. Roman tried to remove the implant, but it was fused to her nerves. It's not just tech, he muttered. It's wired to her identity. Lena stared at her. How long have you been among us? Kyra didn't answer. She only looked up, smiling still. Long enough. Then her heart stopped. No poison. No trauma. She simply shut off, like a machine. They buried her body far outside the gates. But what haunted them wasn't that she'd infiltrated Echo. It was that no one had noticed. She'd eaten with them. Laughed. Worked. Cried. And still, she was never real. Roman turned to Lena after the funeral. We need to assume there are more. Lena nodded. And if there are? Then the resistance isn't just on the outside anymore. It's here. The next morning, 2 survivors were gone. No sign of struggle. Just vanished. A trail led into the trees, where bloody boot prints suddenly stopped. Finch muttered, clones. Must have had a secondary signal when Kyra shut down. Malik stared into the trees. So they didn't just send one scout. They sent a team. In the war room, Lena marked the perimeter with red lines. We lock this place down. No one in, no one out without full check-ins. She pointed to Echo's central generator. If they're here to destroy us, they'll target this first. Roman agreed. We move half the population to fallback shelters. If they try to sabotage us from inside, we won't lose everyone at once. Cass added, we arm everyone, no exceptions. The resistance within Echo wasn't just about surviving the dead anymore. It was about surviving each other. Because now they knew. The enemy didn't need to break the gate. It was already inside. The mood inside Station Echo had turned from tense to paranoid. After Kyra's death and the disappearance of 2 more survivors, trust became a rare commodity. Even the smallest disagreements sparked accusations. People who once shared meals now avoided eye contact. Cass called it a battlefield of glances. Lena knew this could collapse everything. If we lose unity, she told Roman quietly, we lose Echo, without a single zombie needing to breach our gates. Roman had no answer. Only a growing sense that the real war wasn't out there anymore. It was happening right here, in every whispered doubt and every unspoken fear. A system of layered checkpoints was introduced. No one could walk from one zone of Echo to another without a biometric scan. Patrols doubled. The watchtowers never went unmanned. Finch upgraded the scanner software, now able to detect subtle signal shifts around implants, even when dormant. "We've found a signature," Finch announced during a briefing. Kyra's implant gave off a unique pulse every 15 minutes, likely syncing with a remote network. If there are more, they'll ping the same way. That gave them something they hadn't had in days, direction. But it didn't come without risks. The next scan detected 2 more pings, both faint, both located in the housing block near the water reserves. Cass, Malik, and 3 guards moved in silently at dusk. They found the 2 suspects, Elric, a former mechanic, and Moira, a gardener who'd been at Echo for over a year. Elric bolted when he saw the guns. He didn't get far. Cass tackled him by the water tanks, dislocating his shoulder as she brought him down. But what they saw in his neck confirmed it, a second implant. "He's wired," Cass shouted. Moira too. But Moira didn't run. Instead, she walked straight into the tank chamber, locked the door, and pulled out a detonator. From behind the glass, her voice rang out, calm and chilling, "You're clinging to a world that's already lost." The new one is coming. Then she pressed the trigger. Nothing happened. Finch's voice buzzed over the comms. We cut the radio frequencies 2 minutes ago. Moira's face twitched, not fear. Anger. She rushed the tank valve. Cass shot her through the glass. Water spilled, but the tanks were safe. The purification system would need repairs, but Echo would live. This time. They recovered Elric's implant before he died. Finch connected it to the damaged Harbinger interface they'd salvaged. What they found sent chills through everyone. It's a map, Finch whispered. Not just of Echo, but every settlement in this region. Dozens of them. Most crossed out. Only 5 remained unmarked. Roman leaned closer. They've been hunting us for longer than we knew. Lena nodded slowly. And we're next. That night, during the scheduled blackout period, when Echo turned off all lights to avoid detection from above, someone sabotaged the main comms tower. A fire broke out in the control room. One of the guards on shift was missing. The other, dead, his throat slit. The resistance had taken a massive hit. Without comms, Malik growled, we can't warn the other safe zones. We can't even call for backup if we're hit again. Lena stared at the blackened comms dish. They don't need to break our gates. They just need to make us feel alone. Roman and Cass organized a full sweep of Echo. They went door to door. People wept. Shouted. Fought. No one wanted to be labeled a spy. No one wanted to believe the enemy wore a familiar face. They found nothing else that night. But the real damage wasn't in the wires or the tower. It was inside the people. Children asked their parents, "Are you real?" Friends asked each other, "When did I last really see you bleed?" Lovers whispered doubts in the dark. Echo had become a fortress of suspicion. The next day, a coded message arrived, hand-delivered by a courier on a dirt bike, riding under white flag conditions. It came from Haven's Ridge, a nearby survivor settlement. Under attack. Harbingers released an alpha strain. Not zombies, something faster. Stronger. Controlled. Request aid. We have survivors. Coordinates attached. Please help. Malik read the message twice. It could be a trap. It could be real, Lena countered. Cass spoke next, her voice quiet but firm. It doesn't matter. If there are people alive there, we have to try. Roman nodded. Then we divide forces. Echo needs to stand guard. But we send a team to Haven's Ridge. Finch added, if the Harbingers are testing something new, we need to see it with our own eyes. As the strike team prepared to leave, Lena turned to the wall map. Echo's name sat surrounded by red crosses, burned settlements, wiped out strongholds. They were one of the last. And now, they were sending part of their soul into what might be another trap. But this wasn't about numbers anymore. This was about hope. About proving that even if the enemy lived in shadows, the light still fought back. The trucks rolled out of Station Echo at dawn, 3 armored vehicles, 15 fighters, and the last of their trust in one another. Their destination, Haven's Ridge. Roman drove point. Cass rode shotgun, a silent storm in her eyes. Behind them, Lena held the map tight in her hands, scanning the road for any sign of ambush. No birds. No wind. Just the distant crackle of static on the radio, broken only by Finch's voice from the mobile station, still no signal from Ridge. Last contact, 18 hours ago. No one said what they were all thinking, we may be too late. They reached the perimeter by midday. Barbed wire fences torn open. Watchtowers scorched. The air smelled of ash and something worse, decay laced with chemicals. This place is a graveyard, Malik muttered, gripping his rifle. But the gates were open. And inside, they found signs of struggle, claw marks on concrete, bullet casings scattered in rows, but no bodies. Then they saw the symbol. Painted in black over the ridge's old bunker doors. Harbinger phase, ascension. Cass stared at it. This isn't just control. It's evolution. They found the survivors in the underground shelter, 15 people, wounded, malnourished, terrified. An old woman, Marta, stepped forward. They came at night. Not the usual ones, faster. Smarter. They didn't just attack. They hunted. Herded. She pointed to a body bag in the corner. That's what they left us as a warning. Lena opened it slowly. Inside was a creature with sunken, gray eyes, but alert. Focused. Not mindless. A human face, with jagged wires running from its skull to its spine. Finch studied the body. This one's been augmented. Biosynthetic enhancements fused with the infection. This is Harbinger's Alpha. Cass exhaled sharply. They're turning people into weapons. A tremor shook the bunker. Then came the sound, low, unnatural, like metal grinding on bone. They found us, Marta whispered. Within seconds, the outer motion sensors flared red. Figures moved beyond the ridge walls, tall, silent, impossibly fast. Not the shuffle of zombies. Not the stomp of clones. These were predators, crafted to end the resistance in one decisive blow. Roman barked, everyone to the surface. We make our stand at the gate. They fortified the entrance as best they could. Lena stood behind the truck-mounted machine gun. Cass flanked the left wall with 3 riflemen. Malik placed proximity mines along the eastern choke point. Finch, meanwhile, activated the EMP charge, their last defense if the Harbinger units breached the walls. Then the silence broke. The Alphas came. The first wave moved like ghosts, leaping over barricades, tearing through fences. Cass took 2 down with headshots before one slammed into her shield. She fought it off, blade versus claw, steel against fury. Roman gunned down 3 more, but they learned. They adapted. The next group moved low, using debris for cover. These things evolve mid-fight. Roman shouted. Marta and the other survivors fired from the back, covering Lena's position. Then an Alpha broke through the north gate, heading straight for Finch and the EMP. Lena turned the turret and unleashed a hail of bullets, knocking it back just in time. But more were coming. Cass, bloodied, yelled, "We can't hold this line." Finch screamed over comms, "EMPs charging, 30 seconds. Malik detonated the eastern mines, buying them time. Flames lit the sky. Screams echoed off steel. Roman was down, pinned by 2 Alphas. Lena jumped from the turret and emptied her pistol into them, pulling him free. 5 seconds. Finch cried. And then, the pulse hit. A thunderous hum tore through the air. Every Alpha froze mid-attack. Their bodies convulsed, implants sparking, eyes flashing, muscles locking. One by one, they dropped. Still. Silent. Smoke filled the ridge. The wind picked up. They waited. Nothing moved. And then, for the first time in days, they heard birds. Echo's fighters limped through the wreckage, exhausted but alive. Only 6 had died. The rest stood on shaky legs, covered in blood, sweat, and hope. Finch collapsed beside the ruined EMP tower. That was their test run. Their first real strike. And we stopped it. Lena helped Roman to his feet. Barely. But we did. Cass stared at the burning ridge in the distance. The Harbingers will send more. Stronger. Smarter. Let them, Malik said, loading a fresh clip. We'll be ready. Back at Station Echo, the survivors from Haven's Ridge were given shelter. Repairs began. Patrols tripled. But the resistance was no longer just a rumor in the ashes. It was real. It had survived betrayal, infiltration, and the rise of Alpha. And now it was preparing for the next war. A war they would take to the enemy. Because even in the darkest collapse, even when every hour is a fight for survival, humanity endures. Together.